I always believed nothing was stronger than the brotherhood forged in combat until I discovered betrayal in my own home. My name is Jack Stone, and 13 years in the U.S. Marine Corps taught me to survive in any conditions. But nothing prepared me for discovering that my wife, Catherine, who manages elite hunting expeditions, was having an affair with Richard White, a millionaire I'd been guiding on hunts for the past 5 years. What made it even more gut wrenching was that our 16-year-old daughter, Emma, got caught up in this sordid mess. Now that the truth has surfaced, it's time to teach a lesson to those who thought they could destroy my family without consequences. Mr. White, great to see you again. My voice maintained its professional edge as I shook hands with the man who stole my wife. The usual VIP package, with special accommodations. The polished snake smiled, adjusting his $5,000 tie. He probably thought I didn't notice how his eyes lingered on Catherine's cleavage as she made a show of leaning over the route map. Of course, Jack, only the best. You know my preferences. Oh, yes, I knew of his preferences, including how he preferred to sleep with other men's wives while their husbands prepared light hunting trips for him. I found out about it a week ago when Emma, crying, showed me photos from their secret meetings. Dad, I couldn't keep quiet anymore, she sobbed then, clutching her phone with the incriminating pictures. They're planning to run away together. After the next tour, I accidentally overheard their conversation. I remember freezing as I looked at the photos. My wife in the arms of a client I trusted with my life in the Alaskan wilderness. There's stolen kisses, her hand down his pants right in our company office. When did you take these? I asked, surprised by my own calmness. Over the last 2 months. At first, I couldn't believe my eyes. Thought I was imagining things. But then, Dad, they barely even try to hide it. Everyone's just too scared to tell you. That night I lay awake, replaying all the oddities of the past year. Catherine's sudden business trips, new jewelry she claimed to have bought on sale, her coldness in bed and endless excuses. How blind I'd been. And now I watched them standing in my office, feeling something dark and primal stirring inside me. That feeling that turns a man into a predator. I've prepared a special route. I unfolded the map, deliberately ignoring how White's fingers accidentally brushed against my wife's hand. New territory. More wild. More authentic. Sounds intriguing, Catherine purred. I want to join too. Always dreamed of seeing a real hunt. Of course, darling, I smiled, and something in my smile made her flinch for a moment. Family business after all. And Emma's coming with us. Time she learned the real deal. Emma? Catherine tensed. But it's too dangerous for a child. She's not a child anymore, and she needs to learn the truth about life. About everything. My eyes met my wife's, and I saw a flicker of fear in them. Had she sensed something? Or was she just afraid our daughter would see her true colors? That evening, I sat in my armory, preparing the gear for the tour. Emma helped me, her movements precise and confident. I'd taught her well. Right here, I showed her on the map. Old Joe's territory. The man-eater bear. Exactly. 8 official victims this year. At least 4 more missing in his area. Papers say he's uncatchable. Have you seen him? There were predatory notes in my daughter's voice. Twice. Once had to lead a group through swamps, losing all our gear. Second time barely managed to fire warning shots to scare him off. This isn't just a bear, baby. It's a killing machine. I took out my old military compass from the safe, the same one that had guided me through all the hot spots. Its needle had always pointed true. But now, watch, I demonstrated to my daughter how to slightly bend the compass needle. Now to lie, just 15 degrees off, but in the wilderness, that's enough to get lost. What about the radio? Will accidentally get wet, saying with the satellite phone. You know what force majeure means, honey. It's when everything goes wrong, for everyone except the one who planned it that way. Emma nodded, and I saw the reflection of my own thirst for revenge in her eyes. She'd grown up these past few days, transformed from a child into an accomplice, into a hunter. We won't kill them, I said, checking the hunting knife. We'll just give them a chance to show their true faces. You know what's most interesting about extreme situations? They strip away all masks, turn polished businessmen into cowardly creatures, and unfaithful wives into pathetic traitors. What if they survive? Then they'll live with that shame for the rest of their lives. Sometimes that's worse than death. We spent the next few days preparing. I taught Emma everything I knew about wilderness survival: how to read tracks, how to predict weather from subtle signs, how to spot dangerous places and turn them into natural traps. The man eating bear is just part of the plan, I explained, showing her the map. The key is to push them to their breaking point, make them reveal their true nature. And for that, we need to create the right conditions. Like that story about the frog in boiling water. Exactly. Gradually. First, mild discomfort, then fear, then panic, and finally, the moment of truth when instincts overpower the veneer of civilization. The evening before the tour, I sat in my office, looking at our family photo, three smiling faces taken 2 years ago. How happy we seemed. Or was that pretense too? Everything's ready. Emma put her hand on my shoulder. Tomorrow they'll get their special tour. Yes, honey, the most special tour of their lives. I watched the sunset paint the sky blood red. Tomorrow our hunt would begin, and this wouldn't be just revenge. It would be a lesson about how some things can't be forgiven, can't be forgotten, and certainly can't go unpunished. Over these days, I drilled survival skills into Emma with the same intensity I'd learned them in the Marines. She soaked up everything like a sponge: how to mark trails without leaving obvious signs, how to calculate distances in rough terrain, how to read the wind. More importantly, she learned the art of patience, the hunter's patience. Remember, I told her while checking our emergency equipment in wilderness survival, it's not the big dangers that kill you. It's the small mistakes: a wrong turn, a wet matchbox, a missed weather sign. We're going to use everything against them, even the bear. Old Joe, he's our wild card, the ace up our sleeve. Bears are predictable in their unpredictability. They're perfect for creating controlled chaos. We spent hours memorizing the terrain around Old Joe's territory. Every ridge, every stream, every dangerous slope. The landscape would become our ally, herding our prey exactly where we wanted them. The key is psychological pressure. I explained while packing the medical kit, deliberately leaving out several essential items. Physical discomfort is just the beginning. The real breakdown happens in the mind. Emma helped me prepare the radio equipment, carefully waterproofing everything, except the backup units we give to White and Catherine. Those got special treatment: hair-thin cracks in the seals, barely noticeable weak points, just enough to guarantee failure when needed. What if they try to call for help? She asked, testing the compromised equipment. With what? The regular radio will be wet. Satellite phone will mysteriously malfunction. And cell service. I chuckled darkly. Welcome to the Alaskan wilderness, where your 5-bar life means nothing. That night, checking our gear one last time, I found myself humming an old Marine cadence. The rhythm of preparation, the calm before the storm, it all felt familiar. Like countless missions before, only this time, the enemy wasn't wearing a uniform. This time, it was personal. You're different, Emma noted, watching me clean my rifle with practiced precision. Calmer, more focused. That's what righteous purpose does to you, honey. When you know you're delivering justice, everything becomes crystal clear. I'd look at our preparations spread across the room. Maps marked with false trails, tampered equipment, carefully planned accidents waiting to happen. Everything measured, everything calculated, like a chess game where we already played out 20 moves ahead. Remember, I told Emma as we packed the last items, we're not just planning revenge. We're arranging a stage for them to perform on. And like all good theater, it needs proper pacing. Tomorrow, the curtain rises on our little drama, and nature itself will be our director. She nodded, and in the dim light of the armory, her eyes gleamed with understanding beyond her years. The child I protected all her life had become a hunter in her own right, ready to help deliver justice to those who betrayed us both. Tomorrow, Richard White would learn that all his money couldn't buy him out of primal fear, and Catherine would discover that betrayal has a price tag no platinum credit card could cover. The wilderness would strip away their civilized facades, revealing the cowards beneath. And we would be there to document every moment of their fall from grace. The morning fog crept across the airfield in wispy tendrils, clinging to the landing gear of our bush plane like ghostly fingers. I watched as Richard White made a show of helping my wife board, his hand lingering on her waist longer than necessary. Emma, standing beside me, hissed quietly through her teeth. "Easy, baby," I whispered to her. "Watch and remember. Today you'll see how a polished facade cracks under the pressure of fear." The 2-hour flight passed in tense silence. Catherine kept throwing worried glances at our daughter, clearly nervous about her presence. White, sprawled in his leather seat, leafed through a glossy hunting magazine, occasionally commenting on his past exploits. "Remember that bear last season, Jack?" His smug grin was grating. Hell of a shot, wasn't it? Right through the heart. Of course I remember. I nodded, suppressing the urge to remind him how he missed 3 times before I had to take down the bear when it was nearly on top of our wannabe marksman. "You'll have a chance to repeat that success today." We landed on a small lake in the foothills of the Rangel Range. The spot was perfectly chosen, close enough to Old Joe's territory, but still outside his usual hunting grounds. Let them get comfortable, relax, lower their guard. God, what a wilderness! Catherine shivered, surveying the endless taiga. "Are you sure it's safe here?" "Absolutely, dear," I smiled, helping Emma unload the gear. "As long as we stick together and follow the rules, nothing will happen." For the first 2 hours of the trek, I deliberately led the group along a relatively easy route. Let them get used to the weight of their packs, the squelching ground beneath their feet, the dense undergrowth. White kept stopping to admire the view, wheezing and wiping sweat from his face. Finding it tough, Emma asked innocently, easily leaping over a fallen tree with full gear, "I thought you said you worked out regularly at your premium gym." I noticed a muscle twitch in our hunter's groomed face. The first crack in the facade had appeared sooner than I'd expected. By noon, we reached our first checkpoint, a swift but narrow river. This is where the real show would begin. Damn, I theatrically patted my tactical vest pockets. "I think I left the map for this section in the float plane." "What do you mean, left it?" White spun toward me. "You're supposed to be a professional. How can you forget the map?" "Calm down, Richard." Catherine placed her hand on his shoulder, and I noticed how he instinctively leaned into her touch. "We have GPS and compass." "Right." I pulled out the pre-prepared compass. "We're heading northeast toward the next ridge." Emma, knowing about the slightly bent needle, smirked knowingly. In reality, we were heading east-northeast, gradually veering toward Old Joe's territory. As evening approached, a light rain began to fall. Small and irritating, it quickly turned the trail into slick mud. White was clearly exhausted, stumbling and cursing every 10 steps. "Can we take a break?" The pleading notes in his voice were music to my ears. I could use a snack. "No," I shook my head. "There's a perfect camping spot ahead, but it's another hour's walk. It's not safe to stop here." "Not safe? Why?" "Bear tracks," I said casually, pointing to some trampled grass. "Fresh. 2, 3 hours old max." White visibly paled, his hand involuntarily twitching toward his rifle. Catherine also grew nervous, pressing closer to her lover. "But you said it was safe here." The hysterical notes in her voice were just beginning. "Nothing's truly safe in Alaska, dear," I shrugged. "Especially during bear mating season. They get very territorial." We walked another hour until dusk began creeping between the trees. The rain intensified, turning everything around us into blurry gray silhouettes. Finally, I called for a halt, pointing to a small clearing under a rocky overhang. "Emma, help set up the tents," I commanded. "Richard, why don't you gather some firewood? Dry stuff only, or we'll have a hell of a time getting it started." White reluctantly trudged toward the nearest trees, constantly looking over his shoulder. His vaunted self-confidence was melting with each minute spent in the real wilderness. "How are you holding up?" Emma asked quietly, helping me stretch the tarp. Watching them. Together. "Easy, honey." I checked the knots. "This is just the beginning. Wait till you see what comes next." As if answering my words, a deep growl echoed through the forest. Not too close, but close enough for everyone to hear. White jumped like he'd been stung, dropping his gathered branches. "What was that?" His voice cracked into falsetto. "A bear," I calmly replied, tossing branches into our barely started fire. "But don't worry, he's far away. For now." "What do you mean for now?" Catherine clutched White's sleeve. "You said you knew a safe route." "I do." I pulled some damp canned food from my backpack. "But this is wild nature. Everything can change in an instant. The key is not to lose your head." Dinner passed in oppressive silence. White barely ate, flinching at every rustle. Catherine huddled against him, throwing frightened glances my way. Meanwhile, I calmly told Emma about brown bear behavior, particularly emphasizing their taste for human flesh. "You know why they call them man-eaters?" I asked casually, stirring the embers in our fire. "Because once they get a taste for human meat, they develop a preference for it. Start hunting deliberately. Tracking, cornering. Enough." White shot to his feet. "You're deliberately trying to scare us." "Not at all, Richard." I raised my eyebrows in surprise. "Just sharing experience. You wanted a real hunt, didn't you? Well, here it is, in all its glory." During the night, I barely slept, listening to the camp sounds. Muffled whispers came from White and Catherine's tent. They were clearly arguing. Emma, curled up in her sleeping bag next to me, breathed softly. And somewhere in the darkness, about a mile from us, prowled a real monster, the man-eating bear known as Old Joe. I knew he would catch our scent, feel the presence of humans in his territory, and begin his hunt. But that would come tomorrow. For now, I savored the first signs of fear showing on the traders' faces. Their false masks were starting to crack, revealing their true nature. The night air carried the sounds of the wilderness, the hooting of owls, the rustle of small animals, the occasional snap of branches under unseen feet. Each noise made White and Catherine stir in their tent, their whispered arguments growing more heated. "We should turn back," I heard Catherine's urgent whisper. "This doesn't feel right." "Don't be ridiculous." White's attempt at bravado was betrayed by the tremor in his voice. "It's just Jack trying to spook us, playing mind games." If only they knew how right and wrong they were at the same time. Yes, I was playing mind games, but the danger was very real. Old Joe wasn't some campfire story to scare tourists. He was 800 pounds of fury and instinct, and we were trespassing in his kingdom. Emma stirred beside me, her hand finding mine in the darkness. "They're scared," she whispered, satisfaction clear in her voice. "Fear strips away pretense," I whispered back. "By tomorrow night, they won't have any masks left to hide behind." A new day awaited us ahead, and new trials that would test not just their physical endurance, but the very foundations of their characters. Soon, we would see what lay beneath the expensive clothes and practiced smiles. The true hunt was about to begin. Dawn of the third day painted the sky, the color of fresh blood. I stood at the clearing's edge, watching as the first rays of sunlight pierced through the dense morning fog, transforming the forest into a ghostly maze of shadows and light. The air held that peculiar stillness that comes only before great calamity. Even the birds were silent, as if sensing the predator's approach. Dan Fogg. White nervously adjusted the collar of his $1,500 designer jacket. His hands, adorned with gold rings, trembled noticeably. Maybe we should wait for it to clear. Getting cold feet. I deliberately emphasized the words, noting how his Adam's apple bobbed. "What happened to your stories about taking down that grizzly single-handedly?" Emma, standing beside me, barely suppressed a smirk. We both remembered that incident. White had been spraying bullets in every direction from his overpriced rifle until I finished off the wounded bear at point-blank range. "Just exercising reasonable caution," he snapped, unconsciously stroking the stock of his Weatherby Mark V. a $20,000 piece that had seen more photo ops than actual hunting. Unlike some, I prefer to calculate risks. Oh, yes, you're quite the master of risk calculation. I caught Catherine's flinch from the corner of my eye, especially when it comes to other men's wives. The fog thickened, turning the trees into blurry silhouettes. Somewhere in the distance, a low guttural roar echoed through the forest, making the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Old Joe was announcing his presence. Dear God, what was that? Catherine clutched White's sleeve, her manicured nails digging into the expensive fabric. Stay calm. I demonstratively checked the action on my weathered but reliable rifle. Just a bear marking his territory. Though judging by the timbre of that roar, it's the exact specimen the papers have been writing about. Old Joe himself. The man-eater? White's voice cracked into a falsetto, sweat beading on his forehead despite the morning chill. The very same. 8 official victims this year, at least 4 more missing persons in his territory. I began explaining methodically, watching their faces transform. They say he specifically hunts humans, tracks tourist groups, cuts off escape routes, and then… Enough! White's shout bordered on hysteria, his groomed face mottled with red patches. We need to get out of here. I'm afraid it's too late. I nodded toward the flattened grass at the clearing's edge. A fresh paw print with claw marks the size of a hunting knife spoke louder than any words. They froze like rabbits before a snake. White clutched his rifle with white-knuckled fingers. Catherine's breathing became rapid and shallow, her chest heaving under her expensive jacket like a cornered doe. And Emma. Emma quietly activated her phone's camera, ready to capture the climax of our performance. The beast appeared silently. 900 pounds of pure muscle and fury materialized from the fog like a nightmare made flesh. His fur was matted and dirty, and an old scar across his muzzle gave him a truly demonic appearance. Yellow fangs the length of a human finger glistened wetly in the morning light. "Oh God," Catherine whispered, her face turning whiter than snow. "Don't move," I commanded, slowly raising my rifle. Everyone stay calm. The bear rose on his hind legs, towering over us like a living mountain. His roar made the air vibrate and sent birds scattering from nearby trees. That's when I noticed the dark stain spreading down White's pants leg. "Shoot it," Catherine screamed hysterically, clinging to her lover. "You said you were the best shot at the club. Shoot." But the best shot stood paralyzed with terror. His hands shook so violently that his expensive rifle wobbled like a toy. And then came the moment that revealed his true nature in all its glory. The bear took a step forward, and White, with unexpected agility for his build, shoved Catherine toward the beast. He simply pushed her, using her as a human shield, then bolted for the trees, zigzagging like a jackrabbit. "Help!" Catherine's shriek, as she tumbled down the slope straight toward the bear's paws, cut through the air. The beast shifted its attention to the easy prey. Its massive head swayed, sniffing the fear that oozed from every pore of my unfaithful wife. "Emma, keep filming," I muttered, already raising my rifle. My first shot went into the air, deliberately loud, making the bear freeze for a second. The second shot hit the ground before his paws, setting up a fountain of mud and grass. The third, again in the air, but from a different direction, creating an illusion of being surrounded. Old Joe hesitated. Despite his man-eater reputation, he remained a wild animal, and wild animals don't like surprises, especially when those surprises thunder and flash from all directions. I moved slowly toward Catherine, continuing to methodically fire into the air. From the corner of my eye, I could see Emma capturing every second of this performance, focusing particularly on White's cowardly flight. "Don't move," I ordered my wife, who was whimpering in terror. "Crawl back very slowly. Very slowly." The bear shifted from paw to paw, clearly irritated by this noisy opponent. Then something caught his attention, hysterical screaming from the direction of the thicket where our hero had fled. White had panicked himself right into a thorny bush and gotten hopelessly tangled there, caught in the straps of his expensive gear. His screams, more like pig squeals, attracted the bear far more than the immobile prey. Old Joe turned and moved toward the sound. I seized the moment to grab Catherine by the collar and drag her to safety. She was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. You saved me, she clung to me, smearing mascara across her cheeks. And he showed his true colors. I pushed her away. Come on, let's see how your brave lover is doing. We cautiously approached the bushes, where pitiful whimpers could still be heard. The sight was worthy of a master painter. Richard White, covered in scratches and thorns, with a wet stain on his pants, was crouched in the undergrowth, covering his head with his hands. Oh, how the mighty have fallen! I deliberately raised my voice. Where's all your boasted bravery now, Mr. White? Where are all those stories about your hunting prowess? Please, he moaned. Help me get out. Of course, I'll help. I stepped closer. But first, Emma, why don't you show your mother what you managed to capture? Catherine silently watched the phone screen. Again and again, she replayed the moment where her lover threw her toward the bear, saving his own skin. Her face grew progressively paler until it took on a greenish tinge. You know what's most interesting? I leaned down toward White. Looks like even old Joe turned his nose up at such carrion. Apparently, even man-eating bears have standards. What do you want? He croaked, looking up at me in terror. For starters, to have you look in the eyes of the woman you just tried to feed to a bear. I turned to Catherine. Well, dear, still planning to run away with this hero. Still believe in his courage and love. Her retching spoke louder than any words, and somewhere in the fog, the bear's roar faded away, as if nature itself was putting a period at the end of this story of betrayal and cowardice. We're heading back. I shouldered my rifle. I think everyone got what they came for. By the way, Richard, don't worry about the ruined pants. I'll add the dry cleaning to your tour bill, along with moral compensation for attempting to feed my wife to a bear. The fog began to lift, revealing the faces of the traitors, scarred by thorns and fear. And for the first time in a long while, I felt satisfaction. The plan had worked even better than I'd expected. Nature had put everything in its proper place, showing the true worth of big talk and fake courage. Come on, honey. I put my arm around my daughter's shoulders. Looks like Mom and her friend need some time to process certain life lessons. Emma pressed against me, and in her eyes, I saw the reflection of my own triumph. Revenge had been served, and it had tasted sweeter than I could have imagined. There was no need to spill blood or dirty our hands. It was enough to let fear and cowardice do their work. And ahead of us lay the journey home, where these two would have to live with their shame. Live with the memory of how one pushed the other into death's jaws to save his own hide. Live with the video recording of their fall from grace, which would be circulating through every hunting club in the country by tomorrow. We made our way back to the float plane in heavy silence. White limped behind us, still picking thorns from his designer clothes, while Catherine walked with her arms wrapped around herself, shivering despite the warming day. Their earlier intimacy had evaporated like morning dew, replaced by mutual disgust and shame. The wilderness had done what I couldn't, stripped away their civilized veneer to reveal the rot beneath. No amount of expensive gear or practiced charm could hide what we all witnessed. Nature, in its brutal honesty, had served as judge, jury, and executioner of their carefully constructed lies. As we loaded our gear into the plane, I caught Emma studying the video one more time. The look of satisfaction on her face mirrored my own feelings. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about inflicting pain, it's about revealing truth. You okay? I asked her quietly as we prepared for takeoff. She nodded, a small, fierce smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Better than okay, Dad. Much better. Behind us, our two passengers sat as far apart as the small cabin would allow. Their earlier passion had turned to ashes, destroyed by one moment of primal fear. Sometimes the most devastating wounds aren't physical. They're the ones that shatter illusions and destroy trust. The plane lifted off, leaving behind the wilderness that had hosted our little drama. Somewhere down there, old Joe would continue his reign, unaware of the role he played in our story of justice. The wilderness would keep its secrets, but the truth we'd uncovered would follow our passengers back to civilization. Sometimes the most effective revenge is simply allowing people to show their true nature. Dad, check it out. Already 2 million views. Emma handed me her phone, where the embarrassing scene of Richard White fleeing from the bear played out once again on the screen. We were sitting in our favorite cafe on Main Street, and I couldn't help but notice the other patrons sneaking glances our way, whispering among themselves. Famous hunter leaves woman to be mauled by man-eating bear, the headline read. The video, posted online a week ago, had spread like a wildfire. Hunting forums, social media, local news. Everyone was discussing the cowardice of the elite client and the heroism of the guide. Did you see the comments? Emma scrolled through the endless feed of responses. Everyone's writing that they want to book a tour specifically with you. They say a true professional is tested in extreme situations. I smirked, sipping my coffee. After that incident, my phone had been ringing off the hook. Wealthy clients who had previously preferred White's fancy tours were now lining up for me. The irony. I had planned revenge, but ended up with an advertising campaign. Mr. Stone, a tall man in an expensive suit, approached our table. Excuse me for the interruption. I'm James Hunter, editor-in-chief of Outdoor Life. We'd love to do a big interview with you. The story of an experienced guide saving people from a legendary man-eating bear. It's a sensation. I'm sorry, Mr. Hunter. I shook my head. But I have an important meeting right now with my divorce lawyer. Catherine had filed for divorce 3 days after returning from the tour. In the petition, she cited irreconcilable differences. But we both knew the truth. After the video made the rounds online, her reputation in town was destroyed. People pointed fingers, whispered behind her back. The woman who was going to leave her husband for a coward who used her as a human shield, that's not something folks around here would forget. You know what's the funniest part? Emma set her phone down. White tried to sue for defamation, said the video was edited, but when they offered him a polygraph, he refused. I nodded, same as he turned down his membership in that swanky hunting club. Though they would have booted him out anyway. They've got a strict honor code there. We left the cafe and headed toward the courthouse. The sun was beating down like it was mid-July, but my heart felt light as a feather. The last few months had changed a lot between me and my daughter. From just being daddy's little girl, she'd become a true partner, an accomplice in our little scheme. Mr. Stone, wait up. A young woman with a microphone caught up to us. Fox News. Is it true that Discovery Channel offered you a contract for a wilderness survival reality show? No comment, I put my arm around Emma's shoulders, steering her away from the pesky reporter. Simone, sweetie, we've got bigger fish to fry. Inside the courthouse, it was cool and quiet. Catherine sat in the corner of the courtroom, avoiding eye contact with us. Her lawyer was whispering something in her ear, but she just nodded robotically. After that bear fiasco, it was like her inner fire had gone out, leaving her a pale ghost of her former self. Dad, Emma squeezed my hand. You know, I never realized betrayal could be so in your face. When you watch that video, it's like reliving that moment again and again. Sometimes people need to see their true reflection. I kissed the top of her head to understand who they really are deep down. After the hearing, we strolled through the park, soaking up the warm evening. Kids' laughter floated from behind the trees. Music played somewhere in the distance. Just your average, peaceful slice of life that had seemed a world away back there in the wild with that man-eating grizzly. You know what hit me? Emma stopped by the fountain. Sometimes revenge is just letting folks show their true colors for all to see. And you know what hit me? I looked at my grown-up girl. That the things that really matter in life aren't your reputation, your bank account, or even coming out on top. It's being able to look your loved ones straight in the eye without flinching. My phone buzzed again. Another interview request or tour booking. But I let it ring. Right now, something else was more important. These moments with my daughter, our unspoken bond, that invisible thread of trust that had tied us together, tighter than any family ever could. And somewhere out in the untamed Alaskan wilderness, old Joe lumbered along, blissfully unaware of the role he played in our little drama. The man-eating bear who'd unwittingly become the judge, jury, and executioner in a human saga of betrayal and just desserts. How about we grab some ice cream? I suggested, spotting a familiar truck parked down the path. Sure thing, Emma grinned. But after, I gotta show you the latest comments. They're really something else. And so we ambled on through the park, father and daughter, two partners in the perfect crime with no victims. Only justice, served up in the most unexpected fashion. My vengeance turned out sweeter than a Georgia peach in August. No need for spilling blood or getting my hands dirty. Fear and yellow-bellied spinelessness did all the heavy lifting. And Mother Nature, as usual, sorted everything out just the way it ought to be. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in oranges and pinks as the city settled into its evening rhythm. Couples strolled hand in hand, joggers pounded the pavement, street musicians crooned soulful ballads. Life in all its mundane glory carried on. And in that moment, with my daughter by my side and a future bright with possibilities stretching out before us, I realized that sometimes the best revenge is simply moving on, leaving the past in the rear view and embracing the open road ahead. Because in the end, when you've got your integrity, your loved ones, and your own sense of right and wrong as your compass, everything else is just background noise. The opinions of small-minded folks, the whispers and stares, the fleeting fame, none of it amounts to a hill of beans. What matters is being able to rise each morning, look at yourself in the mirror, and know that you faced your demons head on, that you emerged from the other side stronger, wiser, and truer to yourself than ever before. And if along the way you manage to give a lying, backstabbing coward his long overdue comeuppance, well, that's just the cherry on top of one heck of a Sunday.